Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning. Welcome to the OECD webinar on the safer and sustainable innovation approach. My name is Mar Gonzalez, and I am responsible for the OECD program on the safety of manufactured nanomaterials and more recently on advanced materials. So today we will share with you our work on the safer and sustainable innovation approach is work in progress, and we really hope to get your feedback and questions during the session today. So before I give the floor to our speakers, what I would like to do is to just give you some logistical information just to make sure that the webinar runs smoothly at your end. The webinar will be given in English, but we will have simultaneous interpretation into Spanish. To listen then, you will have to go and click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen and choose the desired language. If you don't have this interpretation button, please just make sure that you download the latest version of Zoom so you can see it. You might need to log off and log in again to do this. We will appreciate if you have questions, and we hope you have some that can trigger a little bit the discussion, that you use the little button see Q&A, because then all the speakers and all the leads behind the screens will be able to see the questions and will be able to respond either during the presentation or if not at the end of the different presentation towards the end of this webinar. We do have a chat function. The chat function will be used by us to share with you some links, some technical information that we think that could be useful for you in listening to this webinar. We will be using a function called Mentimeter. So we will be doing some kind of polls to make this webinar a little bit more interactive and to get some of the feedback from you. So we will be sharing all these links during the discussion. So please have your telephone ready or the computer. You can use either devices. We have several experts that have been leading this effort. The webinar will be shared by Leah Suteman Hernandez, and then we will have presentations from Araceli Sanchez, Juan Riego Sintes, Francis Peters, Cornel Nurlander, Kwasi Nyarko, Bratati Kar, Catherine Schirn, and Agnes Omen. So we will be introducing them to you as we move ahead. So before I give the floor to my chair, Leah, I just want to remind you we have a very packed agenda. So just please keep tuned and stay with us and ask questions as you may have them. For those of you that are new to the OECD, we would like just to make sure that you know that this is an intergovernmental organization. It's typically regrouping policymakers. The work that we're going to be presenting today is done under the umbrella of the Chemicals and Biotechnology Committee, and in particular done by the Working Party on Manufactured Nanomaterials. And this group obviously combines expertise in governmental representatives. We have industry representative, academia, environmental NGOs, animal welfare organizations that together try to pull out the expertise and to find the way forward that is suitable for all the participant stakeholders. The OECD Chemicals Committee, all these groups that were available in the first slide, work together with the same aim, which is really to develop harmonized instruments for the safe of chemicals. And with this, I would like to give the floor to my chair, Leah Suteman Hernandez, so she can give you the first part of the presentation. Thank you, Leah. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mar. Welcome, everybody. So I have the pleasure today to introduce the safer sustainable innovation approach. So the goal of today's webinar is to create awareness of the work that we do, but also to give you a helicopter view. So keep that in mind. That's why we have a really packed agenda that will give you a very helicopter overview of all the main activities that we are doing. Next slide, please. So I want to start like why we are focusing on nano in advance. I think it's really important for those of you who are not familiar with nanomaterials or advanced materials to give you a little bit background on why we're doing the work that we are doing. But first, I want to really shift to the global chemicals outlook, number 2, which the global goal to minimize adverse impacts of chemicals and waste has not been achieved. And solutions exist, but more ambitious worldwide action by all stakeholders remains an urgency. So we really are not keeping up to the ambitions that we have towards these adverse impacts. And at the same time, we see advanced materials being positioned in a way to solve many of the societal problems in the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. This quote is from the AMI, which is the Advanced Material Manifesto, and they describe advanced materials as playing a crucial role for enabling green and digital transition, and as a key driver for innovation and creating new opportunities on multiple dimensions. So really what we're trying to aim with safer and sustainable innovation approach is really as an opportunity to promote the green and sustainable innovation, that we can address the global concerns such as water remediation or energy transition or biomedical challenges, energy material systems, and food and agriculture industry, but we do them in a greener and safer way. And this is an excellent example to understand SIA and get a pragmatic examples for implementing them in practice. And for those of you know that the WPMN really has 15 years of experience in addressing nanomaterial safety and emerging issues associated with them. And we really pride ourselves that we really want to move towards the integration of innovation with safety and sustainability. Next slide. So who are we? So the SIA steering group consists of 22 delegations, including the European Union, industry, environmental NGOs, and ISO TC 229. We are 3 co-chairs, Canada, BIAC, and the Netherlands. But we work very closely to the Advanced Materials Steering Group, and we'll hear a presentation from them today because we do a lot of the work in terms of SIA and safe and sustainable by design and regulatory preparedness in very close collaboration. And this group has 21 delegations, 15 countries, including the European Union, industry, environmental NGOs, animal welfare, and also ISO TC 229. And this is chaired by Germany and is co-chaired by the Netherlands. Next slide. So I want to give you a little bit of a historical background of where we started. The safer innovation approach for nanomaterials and nano-enabled products started as a really small project in 2018. And between that, in 2020, the EU published the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability, where safe and sustainable by design plays a very central role. And by this time, we had already working in a publication where we provided working descriptions for SIA, safe by design, regulatory preparedness, trusted environments, which I'll explain to you later on. But we also did an overview of tools, methods, case studies, and we did also an overview of barriers and incentives for SIA. And this was in our first publication. In 2021, we had discussions to incorporate sustainability into SIA because originally we had included some aspects of sustainability, but not all. And that led to, we started in September of last year. And this year we published working descriptions for sustainability and safe and sustainable by design. And I will go through these in my presentation. And what our aims are in the coming years is to really bring SIA to practical applicability. And you will see that reflected in our actions. So we're looking at case studies in collaboration with Advanced Materials. We're looking at tools, which you'll hear from Araceli and Juan for the tools, a brochure, trusted environment, and knowledge sharing platform. So you hear all these exciting activities that are together jointly help us bring SIA to practice. Next slide, please. So what is our scope? So the scope of our work really is to support innovation and to ensure that nanomaterials and advanced materials are developed in a safe and sustainable way, supported by a circular economy. In order to support this dynamic process for identifying and prioritizing the elements to be considered for safety and sustainability. And what this requires is this dialogue and/or collaboration between regulators and innovators and other relevant stakeholders. So we don't talk just about safe and sustainable by design. We see this as a system approach where it includes also regulators, a trusted environment, and together we call that SSIA. Next slide, please. So continuing with the scope, so what are the different, why are we doing something separate with nano in advance? So for those of you who are not familiarized, when we talk about nano, there's an extra complexity associated because they have these extra physical chemical properties that may affect toxicity. So we have to look at the physical chemical properties such as pore size, morphology, surface chemistry, agglomeration, particle size, and this creates also heterogeneity in distribution of properties. You may have batches that have different nanoforms, different sizes, different properties, so that makes it complex. And the questions that we try to ask, for instance, is what are these extra physical chemical properties doing to, do they have an impact in toxicity? And do we have the right test methods to assess them? And if you look at it, the working description and definition of advanced materials, including nanomaterials, are designed with a purpose to have a novel or enhanced properties and improve performance over conventional materials in products and processes. So as you can see, these novel and enhanced properties, we ask the question, do we expect impacts from this? And just for those of you who are not familiar in the field, an example would be, for instance, a very common property of nanomaterials is antibacterial, but that has implications because we know that we cannot use a regular genotoxicity in vitro study. The Ames test is not suitable. This is one example. You can also think of other properties such as, for instance, electromagnetic fields or other enhanced properties. So we ask those questions and we have these discussions in order to make sure that we don't cause any hazardous or any impact. Next slide. So the next part of my scope is where we are in terms of the innovation process. I think the main focus of our work is pre-market. And we have a life cycle thinking approach. So we try to look at the entire life cycle of the product. So from innovation, from the idea all the way to use and end of life. And our scope is this integration between innovation, safety, and sustainability, right from the idea phase to the prototype, to the upscaling and thinking about processes to the use and end of life. Next slide. So what we see now that often, not all of them, but many often, you have a main focus early in the innovation only on functionality. And then when you have a prototype, then you start thinking about, okay, what requirements do I have to bring this to the market? So you start looking at safety aspects. And what we want to go in our vision is to have this process integrated so that safety and sustainability are integrated in product development. So that by the time it's in the market, you have a safe and sustainable product, and right from the design phase. Next slide. This is a picture from the chemical strategy from sustainability. It really represents the toxic-free hierarchy. So it looks at a new way of doing chemical management. And all I want to show is that really our goal is to look at this, the scope is prevention. So what we want to do is that we want to ensure that we never have to mitigate. That is the goal of SSIA, that we never have to minimize or control or eliminate or remediate. We want to make sure that the approach that we have is preventive. Next slide. So what is the safe and sustainable innovation approach? So the SSIA really combines the safe and sustainable by design and regulatory preparedness concept in order to identify and minimize possible health and environmental risks and sustainability impacts of innovative materials, products, applications, processes in a timely manner during the innovation process. So as you can see from the diagram, it is the combination of these two concepts that make the SSIA, and we look at it in a very system approach. SSIA also, a key aspect of SSIA is dialogue, really dialogue between innovators and regulators and other stakeholders at an early stage of the innovation process. This is a very successful approach of this trusted environment it's a safe place for these dialogues to occur. And as you look at the diagram, the top circles represent the life cycle, really starting from the materials to the production, to the packaging, to the use, to the end of life. And we also, our key aspects and where these integration occurs. At the bottom, you see the stage gate model, this innovation model. So really looking from the idea all the way to the end and integrating safety and sustainability along the innovation process. Next slide. So how did we start it? So we started by really looking at a common understanding. And this is important because what we want to do is translate these we did working descriptions, and we wanted to create them because we wanted to translate these to something operational. So the first report, we developed working descriptions for safe by design, for regulatory preparedness, and for the trusted environments, which are the key ingredients of SSIA. And in the latest report that you see here, we developed working descriptions for sustainability and for safe and sustainable by design. And we call them working descriptions because knowledge and innovation is developing. So I think we may have to refine and update these working descriptions. So we acknowledge that this field is moving at an extreme pace, and that this is just for now the best understanding of these concepts so that we can translate every element into tools and methods and make this practical. So just to go through the safe and sustainable by design, we have 3 pillars. The 3 pillars are safe and sustainable materials, chemicals, and products, safe and sustainable production, and safe and sustainable use and end of life. And with each pillar, we identify key safety and sustainability aspects that are important, from resource use to energy to waste, and really try to understand these key elements. And as you will see in the presentation of Araceli and Juan, take these elements and translate them to which methods and tools can help you assess this. Next slide. So why are we talking about safe and sustainable by design? And I think it's important to understand the history of why these concepts were developed. So safe by design and safe and sustainable by design were developed as a response to observations that nanomaterials and advanced materials safety and sustainability will be more effective and less costly for companies if it was incorporated earlier into the innovation process and throughout. Next slide. And as I mentioned to you before, that safe and sustainable by design identifies safety and sustainability issues early in the innovation process, and there's actions taken to make sure that whatever material or product you make is safe and sustainable. And like again, we have these 3 pillars: the safe and sustainable materials and products, safe and sustainable production, and safe and sustainable use and end of life. Next slide. But we don't just follow the safe and sustainable by design for innovators. We think that, regulators here have an important role to play as well. So why regulatory preparedness? Regulatory preparedness was developed as a response to observations that regulators need to better anticipate and adapt governance to keep up with the pace of knowledge generation and innovation of nanomaterials, advanced materials, and nano-enabled products. Next slide. So really, regulatory preparedness is this capacity of regulators and policymakers to anticipate the regulatory safety and sustainability challenges posed by emerging technologies such as nanomaterials and advanced materials. And this requires regulators to become aware of innovations and sufficiently early to take action to have the dialogue. Okay, we have this advanced material, we have this nanomaterial. Do we have the test methods? Do we expect safety issues? And have a timely discussion so that you have timely actions. Next slide. And here, trusted environment plays a significant role, because trusted environment was developed as a response to observations that this early dialogue between regulators and innovators was crucial to regulatory preparedness and safe and sustainable by design. And you see it in fastly developed fields of innovation, such as AI, or the financial sector. You see these regulatory sandboxes. Another example is the European Medical Agency. They have the Innovation Task Force, a place where this early dialogue can take place, so that both industry and regulators are prepared for emerging challenges. So what is a trusted environment? It really is a physical or virtual space in which industry, innovators, and governmental institutions or other stakeholders can share and exchange knowledge, information, and views on new technologies. And this could be nanomaterials or nano-enabled products. And a T invites trust and ensures confidentiality, and it protects intellectual property. Next slide. So what are the benefits of SSIA for industry? So we expect that if we bring it on practice, because you're working more efficiently and because you have a system approach, that we hope to, these were the benefits that were identified during the NanoReg 2 project. So really maybe to reduce time required to research and development, more cost-effective innovation, maybe even faster time to market, because you don't have to go back to the drawing board if you identify a health or environmental impact. You are prepared for future regulatory challenges, and obviously safer and sustainable products, which might lead to better consumer acceptance. Next slide. And how can SSIA benefit regulators? Again, safe and sustainable products, prepare for regulatory challenges, but really this anticipating emerging risks and taking timely action. I think those are the main benefits that regulators can get, to have this early dialogue, to think ahead, to have the time to take action. Next slide. So really how we see SSIA is this, we want to transform industry towards safe and sustainable by design, materials, processes, and products together. So it's not just industry, but we do this process together. And I think that is what we see SSIA as a good way to bring this into practice. Next slide. So I hope today I've given you a really global overview of how we see SSIA. And today we have 4 really good presentations that are going to give you different key aspects of the ingredients of SSIA. So the first presentation is the operationalization of SSIA. We're going to give you an overview of inventory of safe and sustainable by design and regulatory preparedness tools and case studies. But mostly focusing on the tools. The second presentation is bringing SSIA closer to practical applicability, a discussion on barriers and incentives, and how can we use this to bring SSIA closer to practical application. The third presentation will be a knowledge sharing platform and how we can learn from industry and regulator experiences. And finally, an example of safe and sustainable by design and regulatory preparedness, in the sense that an advanced materials is as a case study on how we can bring this into practice. And then I'll come in and give you some reflections and concluding remarks. And after each section, there are mating questions. So please have your telephone close by. There is a QR code that we presented at the first slide. You can just click on it and it'll take you right to the question. And the next slide. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Araceli Sanchez-Jimenez and Juan Diego Cintas to present about an inventory of frameworks, method, aspects, parameters, and tools and toolboxes for SSbD and regulatory preparedness. Go ahead, Araceli.
Thank you, Leah. Next slide. So I'm going to tell you about an inventory of tools that we are compiling that help users to implement safe and sustainable by design. So These tools really help to find a balance between safety, sustainability, and innovation. Next slide. But I'll give you first a bit of a background on these tools. In 2020, the Working Party on Manufactured Nanomaterials published the document Moving Towards a Safer Innovation Approach for More Sustainable Nanomaterials and Nano-enabled Products. This report included 3 parts: working descriptions for safer by design, regulatory preparedness, that, as Leah mentioned, form the safer innovation approach, and also trusted environments. In the second part, we compile tools that help to implement safer by design. And then the third part focus on strategies for regulatory preparedness. So the report focused on safer by design, and sustainability was not specifically addressed. Although some of the tools included in this part did include a sustainability assessment, like, for example, life cycle assessment or socioeconomic assessment. However, the Working Party and Manufactured Nanomaterials agree on the need to integrate sustainability in the working descriptions and to move from a safer innovation approach to a safer and sustainable innovation approach. So what we are doing now is to update this inventory of tools. Next slide, please. So the objective is to search and to explain tools that combine aspects of hazard, exposure, and also aspects in relation to sustainability, economic and social sustainability. So the milestones, you can see them here. We will try to identify what is the applicability domain for each tool, compare easily the different dimensions addressed by the tools, highlight what are the strengths and the weaknesses, and also to identify the gaps in each tool in relation to the working description on safe and sustainable by design. And also we will highlight the methodological advances in the implementation of safe and sustainable by design. Next slide, please. So as Leah just mentioned, the working descriptions for safe and sustainable by design have already been published in agreement with the Advanced Material Working Group. And the first step we took to identify what elements the tools should include was to extract those aspects mentioned in the working descriptions. And as you can see, the descriptions include different elements in relation to sustainability, to safety, and also some aspects in relation to the economic and the social sustainability. Next slide, please. So this is the criteria, this is the way we are going to describe the tools. We explain what is the design component of the tools. This refers to the aspects that the tool includes to help on the design or redesign of safer and more sustainable nanomaterial products and processes. We'll also describe the impact of the risk assessment for the human health and also for the environment, and then what sustainability indicators the tools include, as well as any economic or social indicators. Next slide, please. So you can see here already a list of tools that we have compiled on the left. Some include the name of the tool, and some refer just to the project that is elaborating that tool. And on the right, you can see the different aspects that we will describe for each dimension. So in relation to the design aspect, we'll explain how the tool helps on the design of the nanomaterial, the product, or the process, how the human health effects are estimated, what's the human hazard assessment approach, what is also the exposure assessment approach. I saw before a question in relation to exposure. That's quite an important part that the tools, we consider that the tool should include. And we'll explain how the exposure assessment is done either for occupational settings as well as for consumers during the use of products containing nanomaterials. And then how this information, the hazard and the exposure, is combined together to estimate the risk, as well as the life cycle stages covered by the tool. Similarly, we do the same for the environmental risk assessment. And then in relation to the sustainability, we will explain aspects related to the resource use, climate change, and the dimension, and also the economic and social indicators that the tools include. This list is still in progress. This is work in progress, and possibly there will be more aspects that will be explained in the different tools. So next slide. We hope that in the coming year, by 2023, to have like this inventory of tools that will help on the implementation of safe and sustainable by design in the nanotechnology sector. And now we have some questions for you that Juan is going to guide you through. Juan, please.
Thank you, Araceli. I am Juan Reigas-Sintes, working in the Joint Research Center of the Commission, and collaborating with Araceli in this task of preparing such a compilation of, let's say, characterized tools for the implementation of safe and sustainable by design. So now we have a number of questions that will be for you, and for that, in order to make you able to participate in and provide answers to our questions, you have the two options in principle, either using your web browser and going to the address www.menti.com and entering the code that is written in the screen 42291583. Or much more easier is if you take your mobile phone and you scan the QR code that is shown also in the screen. So this should bring you directly to this page. So I think I will give you some a little bit of 1 minute or so to let you go to the place, and then we can go to the first question. So yes, you see the two options, either via your browser, opening an additional window in your screen, or using, or much easier, scanning the QR code with your mobile. And then when you go there, you have to click on the, I think there is a button, is like a heart, and this indicates that you are connected there. I see that there are already something like 100 connections at the moment, out of 197. I give you a little bit more time. According to what I see on the screen, we have a little stall around 111, or that's 113 already. It's moving again. Okay, so thank you very much. I hope that the other people will be able to keep joining. And please, you have here the first question, and is which country are you calling from? And because we would like to have a kind of map and also frequency regarding the different places that are joining this webinar. And it's very nice to see that we have people from many places on the world, mostly from Europe, but we have South Africa, we have Indonesia, UK, of course, Mexico, Greece. Well, this is in Europe. Ghana. That's very nice to have people from Africa. Then they will be playing an interesting role in the future developments of advanced materials. Philippines, Chile, Iran also. Okay, that's nice. Okay, yes, thank you very much. I think that is a very nice map. I see also China joining, and someone that is from EDQED. I don't know what that means. Maybe it's an organization or it's a country which I do not know. And that's nice to see that we are reaching out to so many different countries, and will be able to raise awareness of what we are trying to do. Just give it 1 second more. Okay, then I think that we can go to the next slide or questions that we try to understand which kind of sector are you representing, the different stakeholders that may be interested in our proposed approach for safe and sustainable innovation. As usual, in this kind of initiative that we have had already meetings or calls with several stakeholders, there is a good representation from government, academia, and industry. Is very positive that we can see as well small and medium enterprises represented, and standardization organization, and NGOs, environmental, and also, I presume, worker protection NGOs. And of course, animal welfare is also a very important point, because as you know that in our work developing test guideline and assessment methods for chemicals in general, and in particular for nano and advanced materials, the protection or the use or reduction of the use of animals for testing is something that is in our hearts. We have already 119 answers, 120 that give us, I think, a nice picture of what we have, the people that we have here. Maybe, okay, 122. I think we can go to the next one, maybe. So, as you see, that the safe and sustainable innovation approach is mostly focused from our point of view. It historically comes from the nanomaterials and advanced materials field, but the safe and sustainable by design approach includes several dimensions that need to be addressed. So you have now the opportunity to indicate us the area of your background. Of course, you can have more than one answer for these questions, because you may have expertise coming from several fields, and multiple answers would be possible. Indeed, one of the fields that I have to say that we have had, at least when we were doing our work, preparing the framework for safe and sustainable innovation, we have to recognize that have been some kind of lack from our side of expertise and focus regarding the social and economic dimensions of SSbD and safe innovation approach, of course. And this is reflected also in the participation in this call today. Is something that probably indicates that we should reach out better to other stakeholders that have also some background on these aspects. Is not surprising that many of you have good background regarding risk assessment and nano and advanced material, because these are historically the fields where we have been working, and now we are trying to further develop and generalize a little bit more the approach of safe and sustainable innovation. So let's try to reach 220 answers at least, if possible. So we are now stalled at 116. Okay, then, as has been mentioned by Araceli in her presentation before, what we are trying to do in our activity is to identify tools, frameworks that try to integrate in a single approach or in a single tool several of the dimensions that has to be contemplated in the safe and sustainable innovation approach, and particularly for safe and sustainable by design approach. We have identified already a number of them that were either already developed or in development in several projects that were also mentioned in the previous slide. What we want to, I see that many of you say that you don't know any of them that try to integrate this kind of tools, to try to integrate more than one, or less, at least if you have to integrate, there has to be at least two dimensions of safety and sustainability. And now we have cradle to cradle, green screen, D4 nano grouping. In Sabina, Guy Nano is being translated in a platform for industry. Icara, this was mentioned in some of that have been mentioned in the previous presentation. Well, ECA has not exactly an integrative tools for the moment. I do not know. EPA, green screen, your brain, excellent. You must have a very big brain, but because this is a real challenge, integrating all these aspects into one tool. Can we put your brain in among the list of our tools? If you identify yourself, maybe we can prepare a brain-computer interface so we can access to your brain. Thank you. the SSbD for the GRC. Okay, main integrate. Thank you. Only those mentioned for none in the presentation. Okay. Okay. Okay, this is an interesting indication to to look what they are doing in the steering group number 8 of the working party on manufactured nanomaterials, that is mostly regarding exposure models. Yes, they may be integrating, trying to integrate exposure, human exposure or worker exposure, maybe with environmental exposure. We will try to see what we can get from there. Suggest UN at you. Okay, the UN is not exactly a tool. It's for integrating of safe and sustainable dimension, but it is a very good source of information and generating data. Oh, okay. Okay, the chemical industry WBCSD. Okay. Cattle to gate. Okay. Mm-hmm. Of course, life cycle analysis can be used in combination with other aspects, with other to build an integrated, some integrated tools, but in itself is not necessary to the kind of tool that we need. Nanomaterials is a good information way, is information place to find data. Of course, data are one very important component to be enabled to do safe and sustainable by design material, chemicals, and products. UBA guide on sustainable chemicals. Yes, the NanoRec2 approach, SSbD plus. Yeah, that is what we are trying to build on, indeed, when expanding to SSbD. Is an interesting example is Nanomark. I was not aware of it myself. I don't know, Araceli, whether you arrived to this one, but this is something that we can look at. And there's the SStoc Nano application. The Stuff and Manager Nano, yeah, it's partly this. Thank you. Okay, I think that there are a lot of suggestions and that we will have to look at them carefully. And for the moment, we have already 92 answers, and I think that that's for the moment, this provides us with a number of possibilities to be looked at. So let's go to the next one. Yes. This is a difficult question, I know. The emphasis of the safe and sustainable by design is that we try, or the designer or the people that's trying to innovate is incorporating all this consideration regarding safety, sustainability aspects from the environmental point of view, human health point of view, and social and economical impact from already at the very, very early stages of the innovation, and how the design has to be improved, or let's say implemented, and well, how can this be improved? Of course, in many cases we will find the situation where we do not really have enough data, or we only have partially availability of data regarding similar materials or chemicals. I see green and sustainable chemistry here. Clear guidance for small and medium enterprise is something that we knew that can be very useful for them. Increasing interaction between the designers and risk professionals. I presume the risk assessment and risk management professionals is also a good thing that can be explored. Indeed, there's here an answer that says that this is probably quite a case of field specific. And indeed, this will be one of the difficulties of the implementation, is that depending on what we are doing, is that will depend the approach that we will find in the design. Again, the availability of data, fair data, findable, accessible, how is it, interoperable and reusable is very important. But as I said, that might be difficult to have. Harmonized test methods, guidelines, that's nice, but don't forget that we are at these early design phases, so probably is not good practice to invest in, let's say, full-fledged test guidelines, but more probably in something that has been said here, either new approach methodologies or computer models. Of course, also yeah, probabilistic list. Okay. Develop training, of course, guidance documents. Yes, the concept of involving already and communicated with the regulators is a part of the concept of safe and sustainable and safe innovation approach. There are very interesting comments here. For example, the one on the design is explorative, communicative, and iterative. Indeed, iteration and communication of information is an important aspect for the implementation of the SSbD. Global harmonized systems. Harmonization is always good, but of course, as far as possible, different regions, different jurisdictions will have, from a regulatory perspective, different approaches, and also depending, as we said before, depending on the particular material chemicals, we will have some particular, in this case, case studies, for example. Harmonization is being seen as an important aspect. the holistic approach of sustainability, of course. Training of chemistry, that means educations, and it means not only the ones that are already in the business, let's say, but also I would say already students, the future professionals. And I think we consume our time.
Yeah, thank you so much. No, thank you so much. Just we have three other ones and we're running a bit, we want to make sure that everybody, thank you, Juan, for this great overview and all the feedback to all the participants and attendees. We're really grateful for all these great discussions, and we'll make sure we give it back in a report to make sure that you also get this information. Araceli and Juan, thank you for this great overview on the tools. But now I want to give the floor to Francis Peters from BIAC, and he's going to talk to us about bringing SSIA closer to practical applicability. And he's going to focus on the barriers and incentives for SSIA. And this is in collaborative work with my colleague, Cornelia Norlander from the RIVM. So Francis, I give you the floor. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So we will, in this part, if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay. So in this part, we will speak about the practical applicability of safe and sustainable innovation approach. The goal is to bring this CA closer to practical applicability. For that, there is some very important point which gives the aims of the activity. So first, safe and sustainable innovation approach is to support innovation and to ensure that nanomaterials and advanced materials are developed in a safe and sustainable way. This is a clear point. Success of this development will be reached if CA practices are close to practical applicability. If not, the principle could stay at a theoretical level, not a practical applicability. For that, it is the need to address the barrier and constraints that could impede the implementation of CA, and it's need to develop action to overcome this barrier. Next slide, please. So two surveys were developed. The first one is about the barrier to bring SCA closer to practical applicability, and the second, he will complete that by identifying the barrier impeding collaboration between regulator and innovator. So for the first one, the question of the barrier to bring CA closer to practical applicability, the top 5 is on the screen here. The first is a lack of adapted framework, guidance, and standard tools and regulatory organization. The second is a lack of knowledge, mainly on what is CA. The next one is insufficient communication, collaboration, and open-mindedness specifically to small and medium enterprise, SME. Then we have lack of regulatory organization adapted to safe and sustainable by design applicability. And one very important is the cultural change involved by this evolution, and also the communication, collaboration, and the change in the mindset. So if we could go to the next slide, we will speak about the part of the barrier regarding the collaboration between regulator and innovator. It's clear that this collaboration is a key parameter to be a success with CA. So one of the barriers, the main barrier, is the lack of formal supporting process to facilitate trusted environment. Then there is a policy goal of a regulator and innovator are often perceived as conflicting rather than mutually beneficial. Then there is number 3, uncertainty of scope of information sharing. There is a need of clear role and condition needed. There are a lack of awareness of trusted environment by both industry and regulator. And it's clear that a trusted environment is a complex and not well understood process. So with this list of barriers, there is a need to work on to resolve this barrier. If you could go to the next slide, we will take a look on some important point for the outlook. It is identified as a priority the need to communicate the CA approach to a broad audience. There is a need also to develop a draft communication plan aiming to bring CA closer to practical applicability. And this could contain, for example, awareness raising of CA, develop guidance to implement CA, development of collaboration platform, to reach out to SME and to define the need. So it's also important that further strengthens communication with other OECD bodies and national and international initiatives to identify collaboration opportunity. So this is a very short presentation on the work done to identify the barrier. Now we will have some mentees, some questions. If you could go to the next slide, please. So you have the connection to the mentee here. So I see that many people are willing to answer to the question from this mentee. So I propose now to go to the first question. So the question is, what do you think regulators need to make CA applicable? So this is a point of view of the need for the regulator. So I let you work on that. It's a not easy question. I hope that you will give some indication on this topic. So we will let few minutes because we are quite short in time for this, presentation. Okay, I propose that we move to the second question. Thank you very much for all the people who have been sent answered for the first one. So the second question is as difficult as the first one because it's a question regarding the part of the industry. What do you think industry and SME need in order to reach out to to regulator and apply SCA in practices? So I'll let you the possibility to answer to this question. I will let you some few minutes. I propose now that we go to the next slide, next question. So this is a different type of question. SIA demand a different meaning set, also an evolution to culture and way of working. This is, in fact, a big change in the way to manage all this point. It's a sort of, let me say, cultural change. It's not the first cultural change we had in the industry, but it's an important one. So the question is, how do we achieve this to get CA implemented broadly? There is some very interesting comment on the screen, and it will be very helpful to work on that. And we let you 1 more minute for that. Okay, so could we go to the last question of this part of the presentation, please? So this is a different question also. How do we reach out to SME, startup, and innovator to learn and address their need? So the feeling of the idea with that is, in fact, that many innovation could start in a SME or in startup. So there is a need to take the evolution, the cultural change, as soon as possible in this type of industry. It's a difficult question, I see, because there is not a lot of answer, but they are very interesting. I'll let you 1 more minute. Okay, thank you very much for all this answer, and I propose that we go to the next topic of the webinar. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Francis, for those great questions, but also for the great presentation. And I think from the feedback, I think we can learn a lot from all these answers to make our work practical. So thank you so much. So the next presentation, I'm very happy to present a fellow Canadian, Kwaso Nyarko, and he will be presenting about the platform for sharing knowledge, learning from industry and regulators' experience. And this is work that he has done together with Batatikar. So Kwasi, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Leah. So good to be here. I'm just going to continue with where we left off. Throughout the presentation, there has been talk about integrating sustainability with toxicity testing and so on and so forth. We've mentioned a trusted environment. There has been a definition on what a trusted environment is. And basically for a place for regulators and innovators to come together, be it a physical or virtual space, for this to practically happen. And so my presentation is really going to be trying to move this forward to see how we could do it. So next slide. So a trusted environment is really what I would call a safe space for all this to happen. We've talked about a lot. There has been a lot of answers given on how this can happen, how regulators can be incentivized, how industry could be incentivized. But even if we agree to do that, specifically, how do we proceed in doing it? And we believe the trusted environment is a way forward. So I'm going to be reporting on work that we have done up to this stage, and also seek your opinion on how we can move this forward. Next slide, please. So the goal would be to identify key elements or considerations that's required on how we can have this trusted environment. As we are all aware, be it where you are, whether you're a regulator or in an industry, there is a way in which things are done. Typically, regulators wait for products to be developed for submissions to take a look at. And so in order to do what we're talking about, which would require more collaboration and more integration, we really need to figure out how we're going to do that. And this trusted environment, the goal of this would be to develop this facility or platform that would allow this exchange of knowledge and for the development and for the learning that we have identified to happen. Next slide, please. So to do that, we have actually developed and sent out a survey, which was sent to WPMN members to get initial ideas on what are some of the barriers, some of them have been mentioned, and what are some of the incentives that we could be. And the survey was comprised of 3 segments in terms of questions. The first was to look at the requirements on how this can happen, and also the characteristics, if we are going to have it, barriers, and also place where we can share experiences. So we've looked at a bunch of different platforms. I think most platforms have some components of it, and ultimately how we can use this to establish this trusted environment that's required to make this happen. So next slide. So as I mentioned, the survey was developed, the survey went out to members, and we did pose the questions as I described in there. And some of the responses we got were really leading into some of the characteristics, what we need, be it confidentiality, ability to exchange information freely, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to be presenting the results, or some of the key results of the survey that we received. Next slide, please. So if we look at the first part, which is assessment of the requirements, it was basically agreed by everybody that having such a platform or a trusted environment would be relevant or important in being able to do that, in being able to have our platform going on. In addition to that, it was also agreed to by most people that currently there is no platform that that is in use. Having agreements that would govern how the platform is used was also deemed to be important. And there was dissatisfaction expressed by some of the members regarding resources, be they financial, be they human, to enable these platforms to happen. And when we asked the question whether would such a platform enable the development cycle to be accelerated, we did not get, there wasn't much suggestions on that. But it was important that, or most people expressed that, being able to exchange confidential information, being able to exchange confidential information freely would also be important. So these are some of the initial feedback that we got. Next slide, please. And then the next was really for us to list some of the existing knowledge sharing platforms. And as you would see, these are some of the platforms that I'm sure most of you would be aware of at least one of them. And the idea here was to look at the platform that already exists and attributes of these platforms that are relevant, that would enable us to be able to design or come up with a suitable platform going forward. So next slide. So with regard to this, the merits or some of the benefits of some of the platforms that we saw is pretty much what is listed here. The first is that in each of the platforms, none of the platforms are actually exchanging confidential information or intellectual property or information that is prohibited. Each of the platforms with its membership are freely able to exchange information that they agree to or that they like to be able to exchange. So that is important there. All the platforms really had to do with sharing information one way or the other. In addition to that, it was acknowledged that for regulators and innovators to be able to come together early, to be able to discuss and be involved in the design process early would be a benefit. Some of the challenges that was identified have been mentioned, such as lack of resources, also the difficulty in exchanging information, be it confidential information or patent information and so on, sort of restricted information that was also indicated. And that generally the lack of existing guidelines going forward is something that we need to address. Next slide. So this is just how some of the analysis of the considerations on some of the information that we obtained. Regarding trusted environment and its use, there is currently no perfect trusted environment that is available that could be easily used. Therefore, while this is important, it's considered to be a new concept in SSbD, in the sustainability and safe by design. And therefore, it's important that we use some of this information to be able to come up with what our trusted environment is going to look like. In addition to that, for this to be successful, we would need to develop some guidance or governance documents to enable this information, enable the platform to be able to function. Specifically, there has to be roles and responsibilities on how to communicate, exchange of information, how we're going to share information, and so on and so forth. So all this was identified as important. And therefore, to be able to do that, trust and transparency of information would be important. Being able to deal with the resources, ability to deal with who is going to be hosting this, and finding ways in which information can be exchange freely. So these are some of the things that have been identified regarding how we can advance creating really a trusted environment that would enable us to be able to put SSbD in place. So next slide, please. So regarding next slide, really regarding the next steps on how we put how we put it in place in terms of the practicability. So the first one is in terms of the use. We are going to be using the lessons that we have obtained from this to be able to develop a prototype that we are going to use. We would like to determine when and how we would commence the activities in terms of particularly if we're going to be coming up with some pilot studies. And so some of the questions we'll try to address that. And as I mentioned, yes, we'll be looking at a pilot study. So next slide, please. So the next slide similarly is with the mentee to be able to try and dig a little bit deeper into where we are, given that we have some preliminary information on what is required, be it that there is a desire to have such a platform, there is considerable limitations or hesitations on how we can get this implemented. Specifically, what do we have to have in place? What is this going to look like? How we are going to be able to have the governance documents that would allow not only industry and regulators to get together, but sometimes industry for other stakeholders to be involved. All this requires a change in how we actually traditionally function. And I believe being able to have the safe space or the platform that would facilitate this would be useful in being able to advance it. And so I see that we have about 40 people joining. So far, let's wait for this to go up a little bit, and then we can proceed with the questions. I believe we have about 3 questions to be able to dig a little bit deeper into this. So the first question is, are you aware of any other platforms that we did not consider? Specifically non-European platforms. We did get, as I showed in some of the slides there was a lot of the European slides, European platforms that we are aware of. And so if there is any platform with any attributes that would be useful, that would be good so that we can add that to what we already have. So far from some of the responses that we're getting, it looks like we don't have any other platforms yet. Down the road, if there is any more that one thinks of, one can put it in the chat. Should we move on to the next question? Do you prefer for the OECD to host such a platform where knowledge would be shared? And so that's really the question here. Just is a simple yes or no, and hopefully we will be able to get some more feedback on the rationale behind. But generally, we're talking about such a platform. Would such a platform, should it be hosted by? Who should host this platform? It's also important to mention that I don't particularly see just a single platform. I see that we should come up with a blueprint on how to do it, and there could be multiple platforms. It could be just regulator, it could be regulator industry, it could be industry, but basically we need some guidance on how this information could be shared and for there to be some coordination so that this can be done in an orderly fashion. I would move to the next question. I think we have a bit of an idea here. And the next question is, could you please provide the reason why OECD should or should not host such a platform? And this was getting a bit deeper into the previous question. Okay, someone says MAD principle. I don't think I know what that is. But... So there is thought that some of the case studies or some of the things that we're talking about, we could hopefully get some pilot scenarios that would enable us to test some of this out. And I think given the complexity and the variety of stakeholders, by having various groups, we will be able to maybe reverse engineer some of the principles on what is needed to be able to have this and to have the guidelines there. So thanks. This is good in terms of some of the feedback that we are getting. I think we're close to the end. I'm not sure if this is the last one or if there is another question. Okay, so there is another question, and the other question is really, what would you consider potential case studies for a pilot? As I mentioned, the more we have pilot studies, the more we are able to get examples on collaborative projects or innovative projects, which would require both regulators and industry or academia or other stakeholders to get together early at the design stage. Having good examples of this would be a way to advance this, to really bring this into practice. And so we are asking if you have examples or at least themes, suggestions, because I think in some cases, confidentiality would be important. In some cases, whether the presence or absence of legal restrictions may be important. I think it would depend, and also depend on the kind of information that's going to be shared. So having information on what sorts of potential cases are all going to be helpful. Thank you so much for the contribution. Looks like we're getting some good input here. So once again, thanks. If there isn't any, I believe this is the last slide. I guess not. Okay, so this is a question which is saying, should there be separate platforms, or regulator, industry regulator, that kind of stuff? I think I tipped my hand by indicating that I think there could be multiple platforms simultaneously, but still, let's see what people say. Okay, so it's almost evenly in terms of the response, almost 50-50, thinking that yes, it should be separate, and thinking that it should, there should be regulator. That's good. That's good. Personally, I do believe that we do need both. There are instances where both would be needed. So let's hope that. Is this the last slide? I now feel like I don't remember everything on the slide. So yes, this is the last one. So thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Kwasi. This is great and a lot of feedback. So I'm really happy that you got a lot of feedback that we can move this and get into the pilot, so we can have this platform really brought to life. So the next presentation, we're right on time, which is great. Thank you, Kwasi, for your acknowledgement for the time. Is about regulatory preparedness and safe and sustainable by design in practice. So this is a collaboration or synergies with the advanced materials, and we have two wonderful presentations. The chair of the steering group of advanced materials, Katrin Schwinn, will start and give you an introduction of the work in the advanced materials steering group. And then Agnes Omer will share some knowledge on this early for ADMA approach that has been, that is further being developed within the OECD. So I'll give you the floor, Katrin.
Thank you, Leah. Next slide, please. Before I present you what the WPMN is carrying out to foster safe and sustainable by design and regulatory preparedness for advanced material, I would just like to give you an idea what OECD WPMN understands by advanced materials. So we have developed a so-called working description that describes the playing field of advanced materials within WPMN and in which context WPMN is engaged with advanced materials. And you can find this working description on the OECD website. So within OECD, we understand advanced materials as materials that are rationally designed to have new or enhanced properties and or targeted or enhanced structural features with the object to achieve specific or improved functional performances. And this can be materials which are new emerged, but also materials that are made from already existing materials. And this can also include materials from innovative manufacture processes that enables the creation of targeted structures. And as WPMN comes from nanomaterials, nanomaterials are still starting point of advanced materials, but it's not limited to the nanoscale. And we also acknowledge that what's considered as advanced materials at this time might change due to the increased knowledge on these materials, on the technical processes, or due to established regulatory implementations. This working description has also an annex where you can find, for instance, examples of advanced materials or criteria for advanced materials that are considered by the delegations of the WPMN. Next slide, please. So why are advanced materials important? So advanced materials promises technical solution for major challenges of our society at the moment, but also in future. For instance, to meet the Sustainable Development Goal of the United Nations. So advanced materials provide promises for energy transition, for healthcare, but also construction that needs less resource consumption, clean mobility, sustainable agriculture, but also digitalization. And to develop advanced materials and to bring them in application, large investments have been undertaken. For instance, by the member countries of OECD, like OECD member states via their research fundings, or the European Commission to include these topics into their policy ambitions. For instance, the strategy for sustainable chemistry, but also by industry and academia in providing platforms to bring together various expertise on advanced materials and their applications. Next slide, please. So why then safe and sustainable innovation approach is important for advanced materials? It's because if you want to meet, for instance, sustainable development goals, your advanced materials also have to be safe and sustainable. And here this SSIA provides you an approach to identify safe and sustainable issues of your material innovation at an early stage, but also to present that these materials are safe when they enter the market. And it should enable regulatory preparedness for regulators to having adequate assessment methods and regulatory frameworks on hand if these materials enter the market. Next slide, please. So why advanced material then also relevant for WPMN? So since 2006, WPMN is involved in addressing the risk assessment of nanomaterials. But during this work, it becomes more and more obvious that safety considerations should not be limited at an upper size limit of 100 nanometer, which is used as a definition for nanomaterials. And that for advanced materials, also similar and additional challenges to those identified for nanomaterial can be expected for chemical safety. But on the other hand, advanced materials may also pose or display additional complexity compared to nanomaterials, for instance, due to new or enhanced functionalities, but also to multiple components. And therefore the question arises whether the current risk assessment, either for chemicals as such, but also in particular for nanomaterials, will always ensure safe application and use of advanced materials. And against the background of sustainability, it's also obvious that advanced material may pose challenges regarding sustainable through their life cycle, which includes also questions on recycling and waste handling. And that's the reason why WPMN decides also to look at advanced materials. Next slide, please. So what work is WPMN carrying out for addressing advanced materials? On the one hand, we gather information on research and activities of the member countries of OECD WPMN with regards to advanced materials. But one main task of the steering group is to develop a strategic approach that supports regulatory preparedness and safe and sustainable by design for advanced materials in their application. And with this strategic approach, there are several questions that should be answered. For instance, are there regulations and assessment methods fit for advanced material? It should help to identify concerns about, but also knowledge gaps to address safety and sustainability of advanced materials. And it should help to develop recommendation and options to action for decision makers. And in 1 or minutes later, my colleague Agnes will give you some more details on this strategic approach. A next major point of this work is then to identify advanced materials that are relevant to WPMN, and with these materials to carry out case studies. And the aim is then to learn about these case studies and to verify and refine the strategic approach. Next slide, please. So just some words on the case studies. Aim of the case studies, as I said, is to review the applicability of the strategic approach for possible further refinement, which is an iterative approach. And a second main task is also to identify if there's information needs or possible concern of certain advanced materials, and then to derive recommendations for actions regarding safety and sustainability for these chosen advanced materials. And so far we identified 5 case studies that should be carried out 2023 onwards. The one is on nano carrier. Then we will have a case study on 3D printing. And there was a proposal to look at graphene. Already next month, we will have a workshop on fiber aerogel mats for facade insulation, which is supported by the EU Horizon 2020 project Harmless. And also a second case from a EU Horizon 2020 project, which is ASINA, is on silver cellulose articles and encapsulate cosmetics. And with this, I would like to hand over to my colleague Agnes, who will give now some more information on this strategic approach.
Thank you, Katrien, and hello to all of you. So my name is Agnes Omen, and in the next slide, I would like to take you a bit further into the development of this strategic approach. And as Katrien just mentioned, this is really to support both the regulatory preparedness and the safe and sustainable by design of advanced materials and their applications, with indeed these issues like Katrien just mentioned, whether tools and methods are fit for advanced materials, what kind of concerns do we foresee for certain advanced materials, and are there knowledge gaps, and recommendations and options for actions to list those. So how will we approach this, and how will this strategic approach be developed? We will use the early for ATMA system, which I will elaborate further on in the next slide, as a basis for development of this strategic approach. And in addition to that, use the feedback of the cases to improve this system and really develop this strategic approach under the umbrella of OECD. So next slide, please. So what is this early for ATMA system? It was developed last year by both German and Dutch national institutes and first tested in an OECD workshop last February, really with hands-on experience with a case, MXenes, a two-dimensional material, to get a bit of feeling for this system. It really is an early warning system. So what we try to do is timely identification of safety and sustainability issues for advanced, with the emphasis on nanomaterials, and identify possible follow-up actions. We identified also that this system could serve as a screening tool in a risk governance approach. And if you would like to find more details, you can use the link that is indicated in this slide. Next slide, please. So this is what the heart of this early for ATMA system looks like. So you have two different tiers, a first tier and a second tier. In the first tier, you start with scanning the field and selection of advanced materials. So which kind of advanced materials are emerging? And I must say that this step is still very underdeveloped in the current early for ATMA system. So really what's coming to the market and what kind of advanced materials are being developed is still very difficult to get a grip on. Once there is an advanced material, there are a few very screening questions to identify if this advanced material is perhaps relevant to have a closer look at. So if it's relevant or possible relevant, you go to the next tier where you first start to gather some additional information related to the application and market entry stage, related to safety for human health and environment, related to regulatory frameworks, and related to sustainability. And behind each of these topics, there are subtopics identified and lists of questions, which are really to identify and structure the different potential issues that can be foreseen for safety and sustainability for advanced materials. So these questions are used by experts to score them, whether there is an indication for something in those questions related to a risk or related to sustainability issues. So these experts score them, and you can see then if there is a potential issue related to the environment or related to sustainability. And that can be used to, in the next step, to really formulate an early warning and also possible follow-up actions. If you have multiple advanced materials and they are scored by the same experts, you can also use this as a kind of prioritization. So if the score is higher, you can say, well, this advanced material may be more relevant to have a closer look at than the other. And then, of course, in the end, you can have a reflection and evaluation on the impact of the warning and the actions taken. So this is the advanced material early for ATMA system. Next slide, please. So as I said, it's really like a multiple stage rocket going here. So you have in the tier 2 the different topics with the subtopics, perhaps a very small letters here, but for example for the safety assessment for human health, you have the different subtopics like physical chemical properties, hazard, kinetics, and exposure. And there are also other topics or subtopics for the sustainability, like for example raw materials. And these are then identified in different lists of questions, and that brings you to, well, identify potential follow-up actions. Next slide. And then also here you can just see the heading of the different sets of questions. These are, well, it's Still a lot of questions, but it's still also a screening step. So you don't need to have all the information, but you still have to know something about the material to get to some insights here. Next slide, please. So what we will do to develop this strategic approach is start off with this early FAATMA system, use the feedback we get from the different case studies, and develop in this sense the strategic approach. And as Katrien already mentioned, there will be the Harmless workshop this month, later this month. And in addition to the early FAATMA system, they also include other approaches that may be relevant to consider, like, for example, the Materials Manifesto, which is a kind of a vision on materials. And you have the Arvidsen, which is the prospective environmental risk screening approach, or the Kennedy, which is more like a categorization system for advanced materials. So also here, there may be some relevant ways forward to include in this strategic approach. And of course, we use the feedback we received from the workshop last February. So next slide. So that brings me to my last slide here. And what I really want to emphasize is that there is this connection between the steering group on SSIA and the steering group on advanced materials, where we're working towards implementation of regulatory preparedness and safe and sustainable by design for advanced materials by working on an approach to identify those advanced materials and those issues for advanced materials which may be of concern. Also in terms of regulatory preparedness, timely considerations, which existing tools and guidances and guidelines may not be adequate. These are part of the questions related to regulatory frameworks, experience with case studies, and also this strategic approach that can be used to facilitate the discussions between innovators and regulators in a trusted environment. And with that, I think I give back the floor to Katrien for the Menti questions.
Yeah, thank you, Agnes. And I hope you still have some energy and patience to give us your ideas about a couple of questions we have to you regarding the advanced materials. I see that already some of you entered to the Menti. Just wait a couple of seconds. So we are nearly 40 people now in the Menti. So maybe we can switch to the first question. So with the first question, we would like to know from you if you can propose us some further advanced materials at which we should look at regarding their safety and sustainable, in addition to those we already have identified for the case studies. So if you think there are some other materials that are worth to look at, please let us know. So we have already first answers, like for instance, safe healing materials or nanocellulose, materials used for batteries or drug delivery. Yeah, there are the metal organic frameworks or MOFs, vaccines, we already heard. Nanoplastics. Oh, there's seems that the project Sabina also works on 3D printing, so maybe they can provide some input to the 3D case study we are planning for next year. So materials for catalysts, DNA origami, So several times the battery materials are mentioned. Also medical applications appears again, graphene. Yeah, a more general a material that uses a raw material of concerns. So it seems that the number of answers are more or less constant, so we can switch to the next question. Yeah, the second question is a bit difficult. So Agnes already explained that for the strategic approach, the step of identification of emerging advanced materials is still underdeveloped. So do you have any idea how one could organize the identification of emerging advanced materials? Maybe some of you have already some experience on this or know approaches that can be helpful for the WPMN. And it seems that this is quite a difficult question. Oh, now it comes in. So the use of patent literature, the contact with industry. So I think there's some overlap also with what we have heard in the previous question about trusted environment. So monitoring the media. Yeah, a more clean cutoff definition of advanced materials, but I would say this is the job of other organizations. But that might maybe help also WPMN if such definitions are available. Yeah, works the collaboration with the industry associations, monitoring tools. Yeah, thank you. This is, I think, very helpful for our future work. So there are also some further ideas on materials we could look at. I would like to switch to the next question in sense of time. Yeah, do you know any initiative or group that could provide expertise about safety and sustainable issue for the selected advanced materials to WPMN? So for instance, yeah, to help us with the case studies. For instance, do you know any initiative or group that has particular expertise for the safety and sustainability on 3D print or on nanocarrier systems, on graphene, or the fiber enforced nano aerogels? Yeah, we already a number of EU research projects are mentioned and the EU JRC. So the EU JRC is already partner in the steering group of advanced materials. So there's a strong link to the JRC, but also members of the steering group are involved in the EU project. Yeah, we see the VAMAS. the ISO. This is also involved in the steering group, and yeah, there are already contact with farmers, which we may not have mentioned. The industry is also involved in the steering group. So these are, yeah, quite, even they are already in the steering group, your answers confirms us that at least we have a couple of very important partners already within the steering group. So the numbers of questions do not increase. So do we have a further question? So yeah, that's, I think, a very important question. What we presented on the initiatives on advanced materials come quite from the European part, but are you aware of any approaches or initiatives on advanced materials outside of Europe? We would very welcome any information on this. So yeah, US is actually also involved in the steering group. So I think we heard that, for instance, Malaysia is doing work on the nano carrier. So maybe someone from Malaysia is in the webinar. Yeah, Thailand, that's true. In Thailand, there's also many things going on nanomaterials and advanced materials. Well, Sustainable Nanotechnology Organization is at least not known to me, so that's a new information. That's great. So yeah, and seems that also a lot is going on in the Asian region. We wait a couple of minutes. There seems also to be some in South Africa, so we have to approach to our colleagues from South Africa. Maybe they know the approach or initiative. And there was one further, I think it was Mexico. I don't see it now. It's vanished from this slide. But I think we have it in the record and can look at, there's Institute of Advanced Material for Sustainable Manufacturing in Mexico. Yeah, great, thank you. Considering the time, I would like to close the question here and to hand over to Leah for the concluding remarks.
Thank you so much, Katrine, for this great presentation, a really great overview. And I think there's a lot of possibilities for new cases and to bring this more to practical applicability. So I'll try to make my closing remarks really short. I only have 2 slides and an extra question. I really hope that you enjoy this webinar. I hope that it gives you some information of the work that we're doing here in the CS steering group, but also in the advanced material steering group. Like I said, the goal of today was just a helicopter view. We hope to have a series of webinars where we can go in depth into each of the different activities. But to reflect and conclude, I hope you can come out with after this webinar, not thinking only about SSbD alone, but as a CS system where regulatory preparedness and trusted environments play an important role. We hope that when CS put into practice, it can really enable the transformation of industry towards safer and sustainable by design materials, processes, and products in a process involving regulators and other stakeholders. The tools, methods, and knowledge sharing platform will facilitate and support the operationalization of CE, and we're making really steps to really try to, learning by doing, move forward. And finally, the case studies on advanced materials represent a showcase for SSbD and regulatory preparedness, really to identify possible emerging risks associated with advanced materials. Next slide. So I think it's important to really look at the potential added value of the practical applicability of SIA. So we really see for industry that if we apply this well and in an organized manner, that we can have safer and sustainable products, fewer uncertainties, more cost-effective innovation, enhanced acceptance of products, and possibly even shorter time to market. For regulators, we see better preparation for new innovations in nanomaterials and advanced materials and related products. For researchers, we see the benefit of strengthening the research, development, and innovation process through the SSbD concept. And for society, we really see this as safer and sustainable products with transparent and traceable information on the safety and sustainability of nanomaterials, advanced materials, and related products. Next slide. So really the last question, and I think that's the last, and we're going to close it. I know I'm 2 minutes ahead, but I only have one question. We're really hoping to have a follow-up webinars, and we're really interested to hear from you which other topics are of interest. So probably just 2 seconds so that everybody can join, and maybe just go to the next slide so that I know I don't want to go too much. It's just a multiple choice. You know, today you heard about the tools for safe and sustainable by design. We didn't present the regulatory preparedness tools, but if you're interested, we can provide some information on that. We presented something about barriers and incentives for SIA, the knowledge sharing platform, and SSbD and regulatory preparedness for advanced materials. So if you would like to hear a topic that is of interest, you can select multiple as well. This will really help us to gear and prioritize our next webinars. And this is my last slide. So if you just give it 30 seconds of your time so we can gear and get your input. I know we still have some of you here in the webinar. Still some inputs coming. But all your feedback, you will get it back. I think we're hoping to compile all the results and make it public, possibly in a report, so you can hear and get feedback on all the results from this webinar. And I know that you will get a copy of the webinar in a couple of days, so you will have access to this information.